Medieval Europe was not just a time of wars, plagues, and strict moral codes imposed by the Church. It was also a period rich in love, desire, and surprisingly vibrant sexual life. While religious authorities monitored every aspect of behavior with a vigilant eye, ordinary people invariably found ways to experience closeness, passion, and pleasure. Life in a small village was a mixture of simplicity and intensity. Smoke curling from thatched roofs, chickens pecking in the yard, the chatter of children, and the ever-present labor of tending fields and livestock. Yet, amid this daily grind, moments of intimacy and desire blossomed. Lovers whispered under the moonlight, sometimes sharing stolen kisses behind the barn or secret touches by a riverbank after a long day's toil. The awareness of mortality, the omnipresent threat of disease, and the unpredictability of life made human connection not only a necessity, but a form of resistance against the harshness of existence. Families, though crowded under single roofs, developed a sophisticated understanding of each other's needs, desires, and rhythms, a delicate dance of privacy and communal life. Consider the typical life of a rural peasant family, a modest wooden cottage housing parents, children, and sometimes grandparents, all under the same roof. The concept of private space was nearly non-existent, yet nightfall brought intimate opportunities. After a long day in the fields, couples sought relief in each other's arms, combining tenderness with practicality. Children might be asleep in the same room or outside gathering firewood, yet parents found moments for private connection. Whispered words, gentle caresses, and the occasional passionate embrace were hidden behind blankets, furniture, or the natural cover of darkness. Intimacy was not a luxury, but an essential human need, a way to sustain hope, joy, and the affirmation of life beyond survival. Women, exhausted yet resilient, often planned these moments with the same careful attention they gave to planting crops, while men, tired from labor, found these encounters both an escape and a celebration of vitality. Even in these simple settings, humor and affection were ever present. Shared laughter, playful teasing, or subtle glances made the nightly encounters memorable, binding couples emotionally as well as physically. The Church preached that sexual activity was strictly reserved for marriage and primarily for procreation. Yet in practice, rural life often defied these rules. Premarital intimacy was not uncommon, and historians estimate that as many as 1/3 of brides in the 14th century were already pregnant on their wedding day. These situations had their own complex stories. Sometimes it was a couple exploring their mutual affection, sometimes the result of unavoidable passion, sometimes a pragmatic response to nature's timing. When a young woman became pregnant, families usually arranged a marriage to legitimize the child, negotiating dowries, social expectations, and the emotional tensions of the couple. Even practical marriages contained rituals of intimacy, secret songs by the hearth, exchange of small tokens, playful flirtation, or shared moments of laughter. The Church's restrictions on marrying close relatives posed difficulties in isolated villages, yet communities often found ways to circumvent them through discreet dispensations, quiet ceremonies, or simple communal acceptance, revealing a society that blended moral codes with the realities of human life. In medieval towns, the landscape of intimacy shifted dramatically. Bustling markets, workshops, universities, and lively taverns created anonymity and density that fostered new forms of sexual expression. While peasant morality was guided by communal oversight, Urban life offered opportunities for affairs, secret liaisons, and even organized prostitution. Public baths became not just centers of hygiene, but hubs of socializing, flirtation, and occasional erotic encounters. Men and women, young and old, married and unmarried, mingled in steamy bathhouses, drinking wine, playing games, or simply enjoying the company of others. Artist depictions from the 15th century show couples in tubs with plates and goblets, laughing and embracing, a scene that might remind us of modern parties or celebrations. Authorities often turned a blind eye, understanding the impossibility of controlling such intimate behavior in semi-public spaces. Bathhouses, sometimes transformed into unofficial brothels, became the theaters of human desire, negotiating the delicate line between socially tolerated pleasure and ecclesiastical censure. Prostitution in medieval towns was ubiquitous, yet tightly regulated. City officials quickly realized they could not eradicate it entirely, so they imposed taxes, monitored operations, and attempted to control locations. From Paris to London, Prague to Rome, red light districts emerged, sometimes as official municipal establishments, other times as hidden alleyways or guest houses where women discreetly offered their services. Men from all walks of life, students, merchants, visiting nobles, encountered prostitutes regularly, and historians estimate that in some cities, up to 10% of women were involved in the trade, directly or occasionally. Even well-to-do wives occasionally supplemented household income through such work when necessary, for example in taverns or baths. Social stigma was severe. Women had to wear special clothing to indicate their status, were legally disadvantaged, and faced public shame if attacked or accused. Still, urban life teemed with desire, temptation, and negotiation, balancing survival, pleasure, and morality in intricate, often contradictory ways. In the grand halls and chambers of medieval castles, the rules of intimacy were entirely different from the villages and towns. The nobility lived under a complex web of duty, prestige, and political alliances, where marriages were almost always arranged for strategic reasons rather than affection. Young noble girls might be promised in marriage at the tender age of 5 or 6, sometimes to men decades older, their personal desires secondary to the ambitions of their families. Despite the rigid formalities and the expectation of decorum, private passion was never fully suppressed. Courtiers, knights, and ladies-in-waiting engaged in secret romances, coded exchanges of letters, and clandestine meetings in gardens or secluded chambers. Royal courts often became stages for both political maneuvering and personal indulgence, where whispered promises, playful glances, and even illicit rendezvous could alter alliances or spark scandal. The daily lives of the nobility were a balancing act between public virtue and private indulgence, and intimate secrets often wielded as much power as the swords and titles they carried. Marriages among the elite served dynastic and political purposes. Royalty and high-ranking nobles were under constant scrutiny. Their unions aimed to consolidate lands, secure alliances, and ensure heirs. Fertility was a measure of prestige and power. The birth of a son could elevate a lady's status, while repeated miscarriages or daughters alone might threaten her position. Despite these pressures, moments of genuine affection could blossom. Some couples found ways to nurture love within the constraints of duty, exchanging tender letters, sharing private jokes, or seeking solace in each other's company during long enforced separations. Romantic love might not dictate the choice of partner, but it could flourish quietly within the spaces allowed by social expectation. Courtiers, too, navigated a delicate dance of discretion with carefully timed meetings, symbolic gifts, and literary exchanges. Poetry and songs often coded with double meanings, conveying longing, admiration, or forbidden passion under the watchful eyes of courtly etiquette. Kings and high nobles had a different latitude. Affairs and official mistresses were an accepted part of court life, sometimes wielding influence almost as strong as formal advisors. Charles IV of the 14th century, the renowned King of Bohemia and Holy Roman Emperor, officially married 4 times and had 11 legitimate children. Yet he openly acknowledged several illegitimate children and maintained lovers. This dual life of dynastic duty and personal desire was considered normal. Women, however, faced stricter expectations. Their affairs had to remain discreet, or the consequences could be severe: confinement, disgrace, or even imprisonment. Yet sources reveal that many noble women navigated these constraints with ingenuity, cultivating secret relationships with poets, knights, or favored courtiers, often with tacit tolerance from their husbands, as long as appearances were maintained and offspring were secured. The northern and southern European courts displayed striking contrasts. In southern Europe, Italy, France, and Spain, courts were often lavish, sensual, and culturally permissive. Italian dukes might host feasts featuring music, poetry, and even courtesans, blending art and desire. In Northern Europe, England and Scandinavia projected a more restrained public image, though private life still contained layers of secret passion and discreet affairs. Even kings known for their strict public conduct indulged in private pleasures. Edward I of England, for instance, was famously fond of women, yet courtly protocol maintained a veneer of propriety. And what of those who committed to celibacy, the monks, nuns, and priests? Medieval Europe's clergy were expected to embody moral virtue, practicing sexual abstinence as a sacred duty. Celibacy, in theory, elevated spiritual service above earthly desire, creating an ideal of purity and devotion. In practice, however, human nature found its ways. Early medieval priests were often married or maintained concubines, and even some bishops had children. By the 11th century, the Gregorian reforms imposed strict celibacy in Western Europe, eliminating concubines and enforcing a higher moral standard. Yet enforcement was uneven, particularly in remote areas. Clandestine unions persisted, sometimes with community approval, other times hidden from church authorities. Scandals involving clergy, romantic or sexual impropriety, were frequent, documented with a mixture of disapproval, amusement, and moral outrage in chronicles. Tales of monks caught in love affairs or nuns secretly meeting with suitors circulated widely, revealing the tension between idealized virtue and lived reality. Medieval sexuality, across all social strata, was a negotiation between desire, duty, and social norms. Peasants balanced intimacy with communal life. Townspeople navigated public spaces, baths, and streets full of temptation. Nobles managed courtly etiquette, dynastic pressures, and private passions, and clergy wrestled with the sacred call to celibacy versus human longing. Each layer of society experienced intimacy uniquely, yet all shared the universal challenge of reconciling personal desire with societal expectation. Love, lust, secrecy, and negotiation were constant companions, shaping the rhythms of everyday life and leaving a vivid record for historians. Letters, court documents, city ordinances, and chronicles that together reveal the enduring complexity of human relationships in medieval Europe.